mother of limestone fountains. My heart goes back with a setting sun. My heart is in the mountains.
The Most Excellent Hamilton Hatter, 1856 to 1942, Part 1. Once enslaved near Charlestown, Virginia, Hamilton Hatter seizes opportunities to learn and overcome. At one college, he builds young minds and even its buildings, then launches another college in his beloved West Virginia, again building minds and buildings. Hatter's descendant Joyceann Gray continues.
The third event that I'd like to share with you from the Hatter family history is about Hamilton Hatter. Hamilton Hatter is the son of Franklin and Rebecca Hatter, and he was born in 1856. Hamilton was a very industrious young man and did everything he could in order to make money because his desire was to gain an education. He learned to do house framing, make plows. He was very, very handy.
But first, he had to overcome. Overcoming in Hamilton Hatter's Charlestown, Virginia, 1865 to 1867. His almost savage answers did not move me, but all the while I looked with compassion at his fine young face and that pendant idle sleeve. And I can rejoice now in the belief that the school will go on. The children were of both sexes, ranging from 3 to 20 years of age, neatly and comfortably clad, well-fed, healthy, and cheerful, with an uncommon array of agreeable and intelligent countenances peering over the tops of their desks. Northern journalist John Trowbridge came to Charlestown in the early summer of 1865. A war-worn town with its ruins and seething, and 6 months before Hatter's school was opened there. Trowbridge arrived at Charlestown in about May 1865, expecting nothing in particular. He came by train from Harper's Ferry, a hub of Federal Army activity. Old and infirm African Americans arrived there, along with women with children. Some cut loose by their one-time owners, and they sought medical help, food, and shelter. Able-bodied freedmen were in demand, and they were paid well to get the corn and wheat planted. One morning I took the train up the valley to Charlestown, distant from Harper's Ferry of 8 miles. The railroad was still in the hands of the government. There were military guards on the platforms, and about an equal mixture of loyalists and rebels within the cars. Furloughed soldiers, returning to their regiment at Winchester or Staunton, occupied seats with Confederate officers just out of their uniforms. The strong, dark, defiant, self-satisfied face typical of the second-rate chivalry, and the good-natured, shrewd, inquisitive physiognomy of the Yankee speculator going to look at southern lands were to be seen side by side in curious contrast. There also rode the well-dressed, wealthy planter who had been to Washington to solicit pardon for his treasonable acts, and the humble freedman returning to the home from which he had been driven by violence. Mothers and daughters of the first families of Virginia sat serene and uncomplaining in the atmosphere of mothers and daughters of late, their slaves or their neighbors, but now citizens like themselves, free to go and come, and as dearly entitled to places in the government train as the proudest dames of the land. We passed through a region of country stamped all over by the devastating heel of war. For miles, not a fence or cultivated field was visible. "It's just like this all the way up the Shenandoah Valley," said a gentleman at my side, a Union man from Winchester. "The wealthiest people with us are now the poorest." Harper's Magazine's writer and illustrator David Hunter Strother, whose wife came from Charlestown, wrote of just one such landowner who meets in a store a one-time slave of his. "Not long ago, a country gentleman and one of his old slaves met in a store, where they had gone to transact some business and make purchases. They had parted in 1862, but recognized and greeted each other with the cordiality of ancient friendship, instinctively, the while taking stock of each other's appearance and deportment. The Negro was hale, sleek, and well-dressed, and in settling up a smart account which stood against him on the merchant's books, he showed a portemonnaie plethoric with the results of summer's steady work. The master's heart was warmed at the evident prosperity of his old servant. He used to think him drunken, lazy, and tricky, and had prophesied his ruin when left to his own devices. Unlike Jonah and most other prophets of evil, he was not embittered at the non-fulfillment of his predictions, but cordially invited Harry out to see the family and the old place. The freedman's observations had not been so satisfactory. The old master was roughly clad in ex-Confederate gray, faded, stained, threadbare, and frayed at the buttonholes, his hair and beard grizzled to suit, and his face haggard and careworn. His pocketbook resembled a dry North Carolina herring. In making his purchases, he was scrutinizing and skimpy, and once obscurely hinted at credit, which the shopkeeper failed to hear. That afternoon, Harry walked out to the old place, and it saddened his heart to see it. The noble woodland that used to be so jealously preserved and was always teeming with possums and coons had been hacked and haggled until it had nearly disappeared. The barn was gone, and only some charred and blackened stumps indicated where it once stood. The house was paintless and dilapidated, the enclosures broken, gates off their hinges or rudely mended with rails or boards, the shade trees worm-eaten, the lawn and borders hirsute with weeds and suckers. But still, as of yore, a hospitable smoke was pouring out of the kitchen chimney, and the proprietor was ready with a cheerful and friendly welcome. Harry respectfully dropped his hat upon the front porch, while he nervously fumbled for a package in his coat pocket. "I say, Mr. Charles, do you still use tobacco?" The Negro now carefully abstains from the master and mistress in his address. "Oh, yes, Harry. And that reminds me. Here's a pound of tobacco and a pipe I got for you in town." Harry looked confounded, and then, shaking with deferential hilarity, excavated a package of like character from his own pocket. Trowbridge continued, I suggested that farms under such circumstances should be for sale at low rates. They should be. But your southern aristocrat is a monomaniac on the subject of owning land. He will part with his acres about as willingly as he will part with his life. But everything is being revolutionized now. Northern men and northern methods are coming into the valley as sure as water runs downhill. It is the greatest corn, wheat, and grass country in the world. The only objection to it is that in spots the limestone crops out a good deal. At the end of a long hour's ride, we arrived at Charlestown, chiefly of interest to me as the place of John Brown's martyrdom. We alighted from the train on the edge of the boundless, unfenced fields, into whose melancholy solitudes the desolate streets emptied themselves. Rivers to that ocean of weeds. The town resembled to my eye some unprotected female sitting sorrowfully on the wayside in tattered and fading apparel, with unkempt tresses falling negligently about features which might once have been attractive. On the steps of the boarding house, I found an acquaintance whose countenance gleamed with pleasure at sight as he said, "Of a single loyal face in that nest of secession." He had been 2 or 3 days in the place waiting for luggage which had been miscarried. While Jefferson County, West Virginia, today is still small, the sentiment towards secession throughout the county before the Civil War varied widely with the hotbed of secessionist sentiment in the area around Charlestown and adjacent large farms. "They are all rebels here, all rebels," he exclaimed as he took his cane and walked with me. "They are a pitiable, poverty-stricken set. There is no money in the place, and scarcely anything to eat. We have for breakfast salt fish, fried potatoes, and treason. Fried potatoes, treason, and saltfish for dinner. At supper, the fare is slightly varied, and we have treason, saltfish, potatoes, and a little more treason. My landlady's daughter is Southern fire incarnate, and she illustrates Southern politeness by abusing Northern people and the government from morning till night for my especial edification. Sometimes I venture to answer her when she flies at me, figuratively speaking, like a cat. The women are not the only outspoken rebels, although they are the worst. The men don't hesitate to declare their sentiments in season and out of season." My friend concluded with this figure: "The war feeling around here is like a burning bush with a wet blanket wrapped around it. Look at it from the outside, the fire seems quenched. Just peek under the blanket and there it is, all alive and eating in. The wet blanket is the present government policy, and every act of conciliation shown the rebels is just letting in so much air to feed the fire." A short walk up into the center of the town took us to the scene of John Brown's trial.
Strumming
It was a consolation to see that the jail had been laid in ashes, and that the courthouse, where the mockery of justice was performed, was a ruin, abandoned to rats and toads. 4 mossy white brick pillars, still standing, supported a little roof through which God's blue sky and gracious sunshine smiled. The main portion of the building had been literally torn to pieces. In the floorless hall of justice, rank weeds were growing. Names of Union soldiers were scrawled along the wall. No torch had been applied to the woodwork, but the work of destruction had been performed by the hands of hilarious soldier boys, ripping up floors and pulling down laths and joists to the tune of John Brown. The swelling melody of the song and the accompaniment of crashing partitions, reminding the citizens who thought to have destroyed the old hero that his soul was marching on. As we were taking comfort reflecting on how unexpectedly at last justice had been done at the courthouse, the townspeople passed on the sidewalk, daughters and sons of beauty. For they were mostly a fine-looking, spirited class, one of whom, at a question which I put to him, stopped quite willingly and talked with us. I have seldom seen a handsome young face, a steadier eye, or more decided pose and aplomb. Neither have I ever seen the outward garment of courtesy so plumply filled out with a spirit of arrogance. His brief replies, spoken with a pleasant countenance, yet with short, sharp, downward inflections, and were like pistol shots. Very evidently the death of John Brown and the war that came swooping down the old man's path to avenge him and to accomplish the work wherein he failed were not pleasing subjects to this young Southern blood. And no wonder. His coat had an empty sleeve. The arm which should have been there had been lost fighting against his country. His most savage answers did not move me, but all the while I looked with compassion at his fine-looking face and that pendant, idle sleeve. He had fought against his country. His country had won, and he was of those who had lost, not arms and legs only, but all they had been madly fighting for, and more: prosperity, prestige, and power. His beautiful South was devastated, and her soul drenched with the best blood of her young men. Whether regarded as a crime or a virtue, the folly of making war upon the mighty North was now demonstrated, and the despised Yankees had proved conquerors of the chivalry of the South. "May well your thoughts be bitter," my heart said as I thanked him for his information. To my surprise, he seemed mollified, his answers losing their explosive quality and sharp downward inflections. He even seemed inclined to continue the conversation, and as we passed, we left him on the sidewalk, looking after us wistfully, as if the spirit working within him had still no word to say different from any he had yet spoken. What his secret thoughts were, standing there with his dangling sleeve, It would be interesting to know. Walking through the town, we came to the other barren and open fields on the further side. Here we engaged a bright young colored girl to guide us to the spot where John Brown's gallows stood. She led us into the wilderness of weeds, waist high to her as she tramped on, parting them before her with her hands. The country all around us lay utterly desolate, without enclosures and without cultivation. We seemed to be striking out into the rolling prairies of the West, except that these fields of ripening and fading weeds had not the summer freshness of the prairie grass. A few scattering groves skirted them, and here and there a fenceless road drew its winding, dusty line away over the arid hills. "This is about where it was," said the girl, after searching some time around the tall weeds.